Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Weissoon. If you enjoy real-world hunting and fishing talk, you're really going to enjoy listening to my good friend, Luke Clayton, and his guest for the next hour.
This is David Fox, and welcome to Outdoors with Luke Clayton and Friends. Luke has been a recognized outdoors writer for the past 3 decades and writes for a host of outdoor publications. Luke pens a weekly newspaper outdoors column that appears in over 40 Texas newspapers. Luke is on the pro staff of Pyramyd Air, your one-stop shop for everything air gun related. Smokin Tex electric smokers and AGM Global Vision, maker of an awesome line of thermal hunting scopes and spotters. Feel free to contact Luke through his website, catfishradio.org. Now let's join Luke and his guests for this week's show.
Well, thank you, my friends, for that nice introduction. Mr. Weissoon is standing by. It's bow season. It's rifle, muzzleloader, air gun, crossbow season. Also on a lot of Texas Parks and Wildlife managed ranches. So let's see what Mr. Whitetail is up to. I hear you in the background there, Larry.
I'll tell you what, again, we're so very proud to be associated with DSC, Conservation Education and Hunter Advocacy, Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable, stealth vision, which produces some of the finest, well, without a doubt, the finest scopes there are, binoculars now as well, too, in terms of range finding. Mossberg, that produces some unbelievable shotguns and rifles right here in Texas, of all places. Taurus, the handguns that I shoot, and of course VINEYARDMAX, which is made just down the road, not too terribly far from where you live. And Luke Clayton, it is right. Your deer season is here. I want to set up something. You got your VINEYARDMAX put out, and lo and behold, you look down there and you've got your bow, or you're hunting on an MLD and you're shooting with whatever else you want to, and out comes this absolutely robust doe, and you can tell that, you know, she's not got a fawn at her side because of how good a shape she's in, and she looks like she's mature. She steps out there, and she's about, 25, 30 steps, has no idea that you're anywhere in the country. What are you going to do?
I'm going to try to remain calm just for a little bit. But, you know, I'm thinking ahead, too. The doe is fat. Their acorns are on the ground over most areas where I hunt right now. Lots of acorns in many areas.
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking early season venison. Now, I've got 1 or 2 packages of venison steaks from last year that the last deer one of those deer that I killed hunting with you out in West Texas. So I'm thinking venison. So let me carry it a little farther to what's about to happen, I think. So Jeff Rice has got a multitude of deer on his place. We're going to be down there this coming weekend with our bows. You know, it's not a right. That's what we can hunt with now. It's not a managed land place with permits, so you have to go by the season. This bow season, so
exactly.
So right. I'm going to make. Jeff doesn't know this quite yet, but I'm going to make a little a deal with him. I'm going to say, Jeff, your venison supply is gone. Mine will be gone by then because we're going to be cooking my last venison steaks that night for supper.
Yes, sir.
So what do you say if one of us gets a doe? We're going to butcher it because it's not going to be real cold. It's going to be cool, we're hoping, but not frigid. We need to butcher it pretty quick. So what do you say we butcher that and half the meat up, and the 2 days we're hunting, go ahead and eat a little bit more venison. If we both get a doe, well, let's just work together and put 2 doe, 1 in your cooler and 1 in mine. So, Larry, after the doe hits the ground, here's what old Luke is going to do.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'm going to reach down on my side and pull out of that nice leather sheath the Larry Weissoon
oh my goodness, yes.
skinning knife. I've already broke it in on 2 hogs.
Yes, you have.
It works. It's my skinning knife, and it's the one I use. It's got what is that blade? 3 inches, something, 3.5, something.
It's right at 3-inch blade. Yes,
yeah.
Sir.
Okay. With a good handle. I like the one with the burr of the antler. It's an antler handle, folks, but
right.
It's got a good feel. You can put a lot of torque on it, but yet you can put that pointer finger up on top of that blade when you're getting in those little tight places, and everybody that's ever field dressed a game animal knows what I'm talking about, for those little tight, precise cuts. So I'm going to take that I always call it it's my knife, of course. I won't call it Larry's knife. I'm going to take that thing and field dress that doe right away. And then, depending on what Jeff does, if he gets one, we'll put two. He's got a knife, one of your knives also. We'll put them to use. We'll get them back to the skinning shed. We'll skin them real quick. There's some running water back there. We're going to wash them down real good, and then we're going to proceed to turn those two deer into venison. Larry, I think that's pretty much what's going to happen. The good Lord willing,
Well, that's kind of what I was hoping you're going to say. Also the laws have changed here in Texas regarding quartering deer. You can actually debone those deer now before you move them off the place, so that you leave the bones in a hole on the property where you took them. You still have to have proof of sex, and that can be either the head or the sex organ on the backside of a doe or a buck. But the beauty of it is you can now take the bones out before you even leave the property, and of course it'll be properly tagged and all that kind of thing. But doing that way, to me, it's a whole lot easier. You don't need quite as big a cooler when you had to leave the bones in, and don't break it down too terribly far. But or if the game warden, most game wardens can tell, well, this is 2 hindquarters, 2 back straps, 2 meat from both shoulders and the neck, and wherever else you take meat. So you can do that, and that to me has made things a whole lot easier. And part of that is just to prevent kind of the unintentional spread, if you will, of chronic wasting disease. So that's come into effect this year, and it's something that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. To me, I love boning out my meat before I leave, and where I could do it in the States and things like that, or in instances such as my lease. That's also kind of like a second home, and so I would cut some meat up and leave it there, because I was going to come back and eat it as well too. But we got that change done, and all that's great. Now, once you start, how are you going to prepare that meat? I know what I'd like to do with a lot of mine, but what are you going to do once you get it back to the house? Or Jeff sitting there and going, well, we got this great deer meat. What are we going to do with it tonight? What are you going to do with it?
Larry, there's, and you'll agree, because you and I have eaten a lot of venison together. But there's so many excellent ways to prepare meat. There are some rights and some wrongs in cooking game meat. There is. That just are actually domestic meat for that matter. But I don't know. I love a grilled steak, and this is something that I won't say it's new to me. I've probably done it somewhat like this years ago. But I love the smoked wood flavor on a steak. So, but I also want my steak to be tender. I don't want it to be tough.
Right.
Now you can take a venison steak and cut it, say a backstrap. Cut your backstrap, say 3/4 of an inch thick. Now, my ideal venison nowadays, of course, chicken fried and all that, smothered with gravy. I love all that. But for a steak, I like to cut those backstrap steaks about 3/4 of an inch thick. And you can do it right up from the deer to the grill if you want to. But if you can, I like to take that steak, or several of them, in a Ziploc bag, season them with whatever favorite dry seasoning that you like. I just, salt, pepper, and garlic powder will get it done. If you've got a special, it's hard to beat, Larry. If there's a special type that you like, well, season it liberally. Now, get your fire going. I like to cook on embers from a campfire or wood fire. I call it a cook fire, but charcoal is fine too. But I like to use those wood embers after some oak or hickory is burned down, and put you just a little old grill that you can get at Walmart for $25. Just put you a grill down of some sort, and put that meat on there for I like venison well done. And I know that's a disclaimer because we won't go into that. But
but you and I agree on venison.
I like it.
I get fussed at all the time. You do what?
Oh, and I'm going to. We got a bunch of flack because we eat chili in our beans too, but that's okay. Oh by gosh, we can. So anyway, I'll put that on the grill now. But let me back up a minute. I will take some cooking oil. You don't have to have virgin olive oil, but butter would work. Put some moisture on those steaks. They're 3/4 of an inch thick, you see, so they're thick steaks. So put a little cooking oil on there and then grill them on each side for maybe 4 minutes, 5. Now, at that point, that meat is going to be sufficiently done for a lot of people, but it's not going to be tender. I don't care if it is a backstrap. It's not going to be as tender as I like it. So put your skillet over there on that cook fire and put you some butter in there. Use real butter. I use unsalted butter. And quite a bit of it, maybe a third of a stick of butter. So you got butter in that skillet. Now, put those steaks that's already got that wood flavor, that smoked flavor, if you will. Put those in the skillet, and then sear them on both sides, and then put your lid. You've got to have a cast iron skillet with a cast iron lid to do this. You might not have to, but I've never done it any other way, so that's the way I do it. Put your lid on there, and then pull that. Pull your skillet away from the direct heat, where it's just going to slowly simmer those steaks. I like to throw in a little jalapeno, on top of them, just to add a little flavor. And you could put a couple of strips of bacon if you had it. You don't have to. That cooking oil is going to do the trick, really. And then just let them cook for maybe, 10, 12 minutes and then turn them. Keep the lid on them. And Larry, put those steaks on your plate and pour some of that butter on top of them out of that skillet. You can talk about Wagyu beef and everything else, but to me, that's the finest meat that I know about, Larry.
That is an excellent way. I love what you're doing there, and I can't wait to see you do it and taste it. One of the things that I do is you and I both like cast iron.
Yep.
I mean, if I cook, if I'm anywhere, if I don't have my cast iron with me, or I usually bring it with me, or if I know it's not in camp, but I'll do basically this. But I'll cut them about 3/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit thinner than that. Mm-hmm. Put a bunch of seasoning on it, whatever it is, and that salt, pepper, and garlic that you're talking about. Put a little bit of butter in there and get that pan really hot, and just kind of leave them in there and keep flipping them, kind of like I do with the chicken when I'm doing that chicken on a grill kind of thing, and getting those things well done, and pulling that meat off, putting it off to the side. Don't put any flour or anything on it. Then I've got a bunch of onions cut up and a little bit of bacon, and I'll throw that in there and kind of get that kind of where those you can see through to where the bacon crisps a little bit, and where the onions you can see through, and then I'll do the same thing. Put them on the plate, and I'll scoop some of that along with that butter on top of it. And
boy,
that's a pretty good way of doing it as well too. It's real simple, and it's very quick in a lot of instances as well too.
Easy to do at camp, or at home,
Or at home, yeah.
and tasty. Well, maybe next week's show we might talk a little bit more too. Maybe give another recipe or so. And it is deer season, Larry. I wish we had 7 or 8 hours to talk more, but they're telling me our time is just about up for this segment. But you've got a lot of fun stuff to do, and gosh, I do too. We're gonna get back together right here next week, and we need to get together and cook some venison, cook some wild pork, or just have some fun soon, Larry.
We'll talk about that next week, and I'll hear in about a week or two. I'll tell you about my moose trip, and in the meantime, we got to remind everybody to show up at DSC Convention, Atlanta, Georgia, January 9th through the 12th at the World Congress Center there, and they can learn more about being there and going to biggame.org, and we'll see everybody back here around the campfire next week.
Folks, this segment is made possible by Ultrimatic Feeders. Go online to ultrimaticfeeders.com and check out the most awesome line of game feeders in the world. I've been using these things for 15 years, and I've got one that's been in the woods about 10 or 11 years. I forget exactly how long. Check them out, ultrimaticfeeders.com. Folks, I want to tell you about an awesome destination down at Lake Tawakoni. It's Wind Point Park. If you love the outdoors, if you like camping in an area, I bet I saw 60 deer. I was in there recently touring the place, went fishing down there. It's some awesome fishing, camping, long-term RV rentals overnight. There's some beautiful cabins, some bigger cabins and littler ones right there by fishing. You can walk out the door and fish at some of those places. But the place is neat as a pin. It's been around for 10 years. Wind Point Park, if you haven't been down there in the last 10 years, it's all remodeled and just beautiful. So check it out online. I think the website is windpointparktx.com. Of course, you can just Google Wind Point Park, Tawakoni, and pull it up. But I want you to know about it. You're going to be hearing old Luke talk about the fishing down there a lot. I've already done some bank fishing there, so you can catch a lot of blues, and you can also catch a ton of channel catfish along those rocks. Another thing I want to tell you about, VINEYARDMAX. The website is vineyardmax.net. They make an awesome line of game feeders, fish feeders. They're just an awesome product, but they also have a deer attractant. That's what I really want to tell you about. It's called VINEYARDMAX. It's made from dried hammer-milled grape hulls and wheat bran, I think it is, or, ground-up wheat, and also some corn chops. So it's got stuff in it deer-like, plus it's got that scent of grapes that we've used it. Larry and I have used it out in West Texas where a deer have never seen a grape and had them come in on it. So check that out, and the website again is vineyardmax.net. Folks, this segment is made possible by Smokin Tex electric smokers that I've been using a long, long time, CatfishPro catfishing baits and catfish supplies, Ultrimatic Feeders, and AGM Global Vision, maker of the spotters and thermal scopes that I hunt with. Well, friends, let's head up to beautiful Lake Texoma. My longtime buddy, Mr. Bill Carey, is standing by. He's ready to talk about striper fishing. Good morning to you, Mr. Carey.
Well, good morning, Luke, and all y'all out in radio land.
How is Mr. Carey doing this morning?
Oh, man, it's October. That says it right there, buddy. We are nailing these stripers.
It's, October. October's this is a fun time of year for everything in the outdoors, but especially striper fishing. Those old stripers, I've been there. I always like to get with you in October because they start schooling up, and topwater action it's usually good in the mornings, but it's on a cloudy day, Bill. I can remember some phenomenal, exciting fishing days up there at Texoma, actually right on through mid-morning when it was overcast,
That's right. I tell people, bring me cloud cover threatening rain, and if it holds, we can fish the whole charter, chunking topwaters, and that's pure heaven.
It's what we fishermen dream about. So a typical morning, by October, what time in the mornings do your boats head out, Bill?
Well, we go out at 6:30. It's a pretty good stretch before the time change in early November. So we get at 6:30, and we like to be chunking at first light, or at least right in that window, because it is a small window. I say small; it's an hour to an hour and a half, depending on cloud cover. Because, folks, what we're doing is we're what we call blind casting. We are just like bass fishermen trolling against these shallow banks with a deep water access where the bait moves in and the fish follow. They might not show you they're there, but a bird or a swirl or a bust will put you on them. But we know most of these places where there's deep water access, and we blind cast until those plugs, and they can hit any time that plug is in the water. I've got some stories.
You do. I do too, Bill. But also there's a lot of, I remember a lot of times when they were just big schools of stripers blowing up, chasing shad out in open water. That can happen too, can't it?
Oh, yeah. These big schools come up these ledges, and then they move up onto the flats. And, boy, when they hit those flats, you might be in 10 foot of water, and they explode.
That's when that happens. I remember some of those. I can't remember the name of that. I can picture that cove I was in with you. It's been several years ago on this thing, but it was overcast, kind of a misty morning, and it kept up. They kept up going until we quit, till we had our fish. Bill, what would be fun is to talk about. We always talk about catching stripers, and the bottom line is, friends, that Lake Texoma in October, you're going to catch you some stripers. Schooling time, the gulls are up there in large numbers, and Bill and his team of guides, they're there. They were there yesterday. They'll be there tomorrow fishing, so they can put you on the fish. But striper has to be one of the most versatile fish to cook. That recipe, I know how to do it. What you call Texoma shrimp. Tell us about that and what it is. It's so tasty, but for like a party or group of folks getting together, dipping, that's a good recipe, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I tell folks, we clean those fish so clean for them. It's just solid white meat. And I say, now, you can tell your guest tonight at supper that these fish were swimming just a few hours ago. And if they can whip out a quick Texoma shrimp, what Texoma shrimp, folks, is you take a Zeratrans crab boil, a big spice sack, and you put it in your water, and you boil these stripers, and then when you get it out, you can drain it. You can have it hot with butter like lobster, or take the rest of it and chill it, and then you can have it cold, and it's just unbelievable.
I like it. I like it cold. Yeah, that's Zatarain's, folks. Zatarain's shrimp and crab boil. So you don't boil them long, do you, Bill?
No. No, as a matter of fact, we just let it come to a boil and shut it off.
And then it'll sit there in that shrimp and crab boil and just take on those seasonings, right? Yeah. And then one question: do you go ahead and cut it in the little pieces before you boil it? Usually. Yeah.
I like to put it in what I call nuggets. Now the head of the fillet, the head of the fish is thicker than the tail, so I will make about a 1-inch slice on the thick ends, and then on the tail it might be 3-4 inches, and then you're not going to be stirring them. They will flake, they will come apart, but you don't want to do that till you're eating them. And just let it cool off. Pour it into a colander, drain it out, and it's ready to go. It usually doesn't bust up like we're thinking.
Bill, I've got to throw this in a show. I think it was last week. You might have listened to it. Larry Weissoon and I were talking about chili. And we were talking about, we both like beans in our chili, and we're about as Texas as you can get, both of us. Our folks were chili cookers, and I told Larry, I said, we're gonna get some, like you've seen a red wasp with his stinger up. We're gonna get some reply, and we did. People, oh, wait a minute, you do not put beans in chili. Well, okay, we do. All right, but no, where I'm tying this in, this will also raise some hackles. To most people, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think I'm right. Most people think crappie is the ultimate fish to eat in Texas.
That's right.
Okay, I'm right.
I call it the walleye of the South.
But and granted, crappie fillet is very tasty. It's a neutral flavored fish.
Neutral is a good word.
Yeah, I mean, people that don't like fish might eat it's not a lot of flavor to a crappie. To me, it's not.
That's right. And that's why people like it. It doesn't have any kind of fishy or smell.
Yeah.
But it's spongy. Where the striper is white, flaky,
that's
mild
it.
Taste.
That's it. So you take a crappie with I call it mushy meat. It is. It would never work for this. I don't think a catfish would work on this, honestly, because maybe a big old catfish, but it wouldn't work as well on this cooking system as a striper. Another thing that we've talked about in the past, but it's worth mentioning, is an altered way to blacken fish, and you do it now. It does not entail white hot smoke off of a dry skillet. You put just a little butter in there, lemon, squeeze some lemon in there with that butter, and season it with the Bass Pro Shops has a backwoods seasoning that's you use it now, and they're not a sponsor, but that I buy that. It's a big old shaker of it. coat one side real good, get that butter not smoking hot at all, just frying hot, put it that way. Exactly, slap that fillet down, and then while it's in the skillet, dust the top of it with that. Let it go, I don't know, 3 minutes maybe max, and then flip it. And then in the other side, that's called an altered blackening form, but it's a way you can cook it in the house.
It's better than the famous recipe that you use the red hot. Folks, this meal Luke's talking about, I've just fallen for it. That's all I eat now is this Luke's blackened fish. It's like he says, you just get that butter where it's hot enough to not burn and get those fillets in there. It's not a red hot skillet like Chef Paul did. Yeah. Oh, man, it is good.
It is good. And then just scoop it out and put it on a plate, squeeze a little more lemon on there. That is one of my favorite meals of everything. You know, that is so good. But what I tell people, if you were to use the Paul Prudhomme method, if you were to do that with a dry, white hot skillet, of course, you're going to smoke up that part of the world where you're cooking. But then what do you do after you get it cooked? You put lemon butter on it. Right. So why not cook it in the lemon butter? Why not use the lemon butter? So that's a good way to do it. Another way, Bill, I'll throw it in here. I think we've got time. It's so simple. It's baked striper or broiled striper. Put your striper fillet down, season it with some salt and pepper and garlic powder and basil. I use a lot of sweet basil, dry basil, mind you. Sprinkle a heavy coat of that on there and some couple 3 pads of butter. And if you have a broiler in your oven, you can broil it or just put it in the oven and bake it until it's flaky. Now I say the blackened is good, but that's a mighty good way to cook it, Bill. You know.
Well, Luke, folks, Luke ran a contest on one of the social networks, and he said, "What is your favorite fish to eat? Not catch, but eat." And of course, your crappie purists chimed in, your catfishman chimed in, and I didn't see the finish. It was a week later, and we had Luke's rendezvous, and he said, "Did you see who won?" And I went, "No," and he said, "Striped bass," and I said, "And it should."
It should.
It should.
The thing is, not everybody. I think the reason so many people are they're just not tuned in because they don't catch stripers. If they're not in hybrid stripers, to me they're just as good as a striper. They're real. Very tasty. But a lot of people do not have access. Everybody's got access to crappie, catfish, those kind of fish. So I think that's the reason, Bill, that. Maybe that some people just haven't eaten it. They haven't had it cooked. So,
well, all my guides, we raise the knife up about 1/8 of an inch, folks, when you're taking it off the hide, the skin. And that 1/8 inch, you're not giving away any meat, leaves just the lateral line. And my boys have a way of throwing those fillets into a bucket of ice water, and then when they're all done, they pluck it out by squeezing it. Yeah. I still use the old-fashioned method. I call it butterflying.
Me too.
Just pull that lateral line out, and I'm telling you, they're solid white. And that's what Luke is saying. People back years ago, they say striper isn't good to eat. Well, it wasn't cleaned right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, the red meat, I'll guarantee you, I do not like the red meat. Who does? But there's no reason for it. White bass, I trim most of the red meat off of a white bass. Yeah. But, the way you and I do it, Bill, is just with a sharp fillet knife. We make 2 cuts and just jerk that red meat out,
That's it.
But your guys, I've seen Chris, and I think he came up with that idea. But, no, they get it cold and they just pinch it out, and it's gone.
It's pretty wild. No, I went down there. I moved off the water 15 years ago after guiding for 25 years. And I went down there one day, and I left the lateral line in for people. And I said, "You don't have to take that out." They said, "Mind your old business, old man." And now I brag about their cleaning.
We've come a long way. Well, Bill, you're easy to track down up at Lake Texoma. For people listening to this after it airs on all of our great radio stations, listening to a podcast, folks, Texoma is about an hour north of Dallas, maybe just a little bit farther, right on the Red River, bounded by Oklahoma and Texas. It's the striper headquarters of what I call the Southwest. There's a natural spawn here on Texoma. Folks can track you down, Bill, to get with you. StriperExpress.com, anywhere they want to look, can't they?
Yeah, they can even call us. Our number is 903-786-4477. That is 903 888-786-4477.
Bill, you can help them out with lodging and everything they need, and it will be a fun trip. How about I've got a trip planned real soon, I think week after next, with you up there. I'll be giving you a call, and rain gear, no rain gear, I don't care. I'm ready to catch some stripers, buddy. Folks, let's talk a little outdoor cooking. Let me tell you about an electric smoker that I've been using for 15 years, I guess. Smokin Tex electric smokers. If you're tired of staying up all night keeping that wood fire burning when you're barbecuing, give Smokin Tex a try. They're made to last a lifetime. You can check them out at SmokinTex.com. That's SMOKINTEX.com. Well, friends, Mr. Larry Weishuhn is going to tell you about the finest hunting optics that we have ever found.
Look, these are called Stealth Vision. They come from Crockett, Texas. Dr. John McCall developed them. They're 34-millimeter tubes as opposed to the narrower tubes, so more light transmission. They have a little green light that comes on. That scope is leveled because that's when you want to pull the trigger. They have an optional lighted reticle as well, too, and a whole lot of other products, and folks can learn more about them by going to stealthvision.com.
And for seasonings, anything to do with outdoor cooking, all kind of jerky seasonings, sausage seasonings, Butcher Packer Supply. That's butcherpackersupply.com. I think the website is butcher-packer.com. This segment here is brought to us by the Choctaw Hunting Lodge up in southeast Oklahoma, owned by the Choctaw Nation. Pyramyd Air, your one-stop shop for everything airgun related. Well, friends, I have an interesting topic that I want Mr. Weishuhn to discuss with me. Enjoyed being with Larry earlier in the show, but we were talking, let's talk about hogs and coyotes a little bit. Larry, thank you for coming back in today's show with us a little bit here.
Absolutely, Luke, and you're talking about two of my favorite topics when it comes to hunting as well too, beside the whitetail deer and the big game. But you're right. There's some interesting things I think have developed over the last few years, and particularly I think we're starting to see it now more so than we have in the past. I know that we were talking off site here about hogs and coyotes. Now you were telling me about some interesting things that Kenneth Shepard has been seeing just not very far from where you live there.
Yes, right down the road. And he's been watching this for the last 2 years, maybe 3. And he's seen it with his eyes while he was hunting. I've yet to actually witness it. 2 days ago, I hunt with Kenneth quite a bit, hogs mostly, but there was near a corn feeder, there was a piglet, 5 pounds, just a young piglet. What was left of it, we could tell it was a little hog, the head and the hooves, and that's about all that was left. Obviously, a coyote had eaten it. That's what we were sure had happened. So Kenneth has twice witnessed a pack coming in. He didn't know how many, 3, 5, 6 coyotes come in, and he could hear them back in the brush.
Right.
And then one would run into a sounder of hogs and grab a young pig twice by the neck and flash out of there with that pig. Well, the sow, she might have 6 or 10 pigs. She just gets excited, and she's staying with that sounder with those babies. And,
right.
And so the question was, or is, the relationship as predator to prey. There's not a lot of rabbits, cottontails, like there was a few years ago around where we live. They're just not. But the coyote population is strong. Kenneth also a couple of days ago called me, and he says, Luke, I've seen more hogs coming through than probably ever before, but he said I've also heard a ton of coyotes, and on his place there. And he said just at dark he sounded like 10 coyotes, a big pack of them, which is, I consider that a huge pack. Bunch of them barking back in the brush. And he said, I started seeing hogs everywhere. So we're wondering if these coyotes are not teaching their young there's a available food source, but I'm sure that it hasn't been available for decades because there weren't that many wild hogs. But if they're not teaching their young how to hunt pork, wild pork, it's likely. What do you think?
Look, I think it's exactly what's happening. And one of the things that I've noticed on my little place, which is up north of Columbus, just up in the gravel hills above the Gulf Coast plains, if you will, two things. We have seen an increase in coyotes. We have seen an increase of hogs. Now, the interesting thing is we were talking earlier, and as you're talking now, several things came to mind, is that, when we first started seeing hogs, you didn't see very many. The sounders were relatively small, and it may be a couple of sows and some pigs, that kind of thing, an occasional boar. Mm-hmm. But in the last year or so, and I've visited with my brother who has country down right on the edge of Gulf Coast Prairie. He's telling me, he says, when I don't see one or two hogs, maybe just a big boar coming through. He said, normally when I see hogs, I'm seeing sounders of 20 to 30 to 40 or more. And when he mentioned that, I got to thinking about the same thing. He said, we're seeing a few more coyotes. And he said, I've seen coyotes actually following those sounders of hogs. But not that terribly long ago, about this time of the year, I was out at my place scouting, sitting there with binoculars and watching this grassy field. And I could count a total of 50 plus grown hogs, and I couldn't see the number of pigs because the grass is too tall. But the interesting thing is there were 3 coyotes that were hanging around the edge on the backside of that sounder, almost like when we used to gather up cattle with dogs. Mm-hmm. And I got a feeling what's going on is exactly what you're saying, is that these coyotes have learned that that wild hog meat is pretty darn good, and just exactly what's going on with there, I think, is going on a bunch of other places. Because the other side of that is we'll have a big bunch of hogs come through, and you'll hear coyotes, you'll see coyotes. As that sounder moves around, all of a sudden you hardly don't see any hogs for a little while, but you know what? You don't see any coyotes either. So to me, those coyotes are starting to follow those larger sounders. And I think what's happened is the hogs, being as smart as they are, a lot of times they're farming the larger sounders just out of a natural protection kind of thing as well too.
Like, say, a muskox, getting a big group like that. That very well could be. It's something. It's something to watch, but you've actually seen and this fits perfectly with what my buddy has noticed, and haven't seen this going on, but I've heard the coyotes at night around feeders and things where I knew there were hogs, but it could be they're just, in other words, they just kind of stay in close contact with these sounders of hogs. Maybe not right, they're not hungry all the time, but they track them and know where they are. Then when the sun starts setting, that's when we're seeing most of this activity, of them, the remains of a piglet or whatever. Very, very interesting to me, Larry, and I bet a lot of our guys that hunts and listens to us, I bet a lot of you could probably add to this, because it's not just an isolated thing with what you've seen or I've seen, Larry. So it's something to be aware of,
You know what, it really is. And I know we've got a hunt coming up on the Cotton Ranch and a bunch of other stuff up in your part of the country, and even down in mine down here close to where I live. I'm going to start. I hadn't even thought about it until now. Usually when I've gone out with the coyotes, I've used traditional rabbits and those kind of sounding distress calls. It makes me wonder maybe if I shouldn't be using the distress pig call a little bit more often, and that might be a way too to determine how valid what we're talking about here really is. But I've got a feeling that you might attract a hog that way, but you could darn sure maybe attract a few more coyotes. But I got a feeling that's what's happening, because again, like I said, on my place, we'll have a sounder or two there for a while, and then they'll leave. There are coyotes there when the hogs are there. When the hogs move over to another part of that area through there, the coyotes seem to be following them. So there's got to be that relationship going on there somehow or another. And it's got to be the fact that these coyotes have figured out that the pork's really good to eat. And they're, as you mentioned, those older coyotes are teaching those younger coyotes how to catch hogs and how to work the edge of those sounders like that, where they can run in there and grab one and get away. And while the other two maybe are distracting, or 3 or 4, coyotes are distracting that sounder hogs.
Well, I guess one thing I'm going to do is nothing work. We have way too many coyotes around here because where I live, because people are, people do shoot them in the dead of winter some, or occasionally I'll shoot one whenever I have the chance to shoot one. I will, but they're thriving right now. I mean, I can hear them at night from where I live. There's in my opinion, maybe the surplus of the coyotes is because of all the easy pickings that they've got out there to eat, Yeah.
I think there may be a tremendous amount of things there. You think about, going back many, many years ago with the buffalo, and the old Lobo wolf would follow around, follow those herds around. And I've seen the same thing happen with caribou and those kind of things up north. So I got a feeling there's a lot more to that than what we've thought about it.
That's true. Well, you have your prey animals and herds. Well, we have sounders of hogs. You definitely have your prey, your carnivores. Now the coyotes are plentiful. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Larry, thank you a whole bunch for coming back in this segment and discussing this with us. It's an interesting topic for sure.
Always learning.
Folks, this is Luke. For about the past decade, I've been hunting editor for Airgun Hobbyist magazine. I think the only magazine devoted strictly to airgun shooting and hunting in the country. Well, in that length of time, I've learned quite a bit about big bore air guns and smaller calibers too. A spot to go to that if you're interested in air guns, you need to know about Pyramyd Air. The website is PYRAMYD, PyramydAir.com. They have anything and everything you need, from the guns themselves, the big bores or the smaller calibers, to the accessories. Just remember PyramydAir.com, and there's a number when you get on the website if you need to call and talk to somebody. Give them a buzz, and they can fill you in on little details that you might need to know about shooting or hunting with big bore air guns. While you're on the website there, I'd like you to check out the big bore air gun that I've done a great deal of hunting with. It's the Seneca Dragon Claw, 50 caliber, pressures up to 3,000 psi, and it looks like a conventional rifle. Wooden stock. I think you'll like the appearance, and I know you'll like the performance. It shoots not only bullets, but also air bolts as well, tipped with a broadhead. Check it out. It's the Seneca Dragon Claw.
The snowflakes fall as winter comes, and time just seems to fly.
Friends, this segment is brought to us by CVA Muzzleloaders. In my opinion, the very best muzzleloaders in the world, the ones that I shoot. You can check them out online, CVA.com. AGM Global Vision, maker of the Rattler and the Adder that I use, you can check them out online too, agmglobalvision.com. Kuby's Wild Game Processing and Kuby's Restaurant in Dallas, and VINEYARDMAX, maker of some awesome deer attractant and some very fine game feeders and fish feeders, located down in Nacogdoches, Texas. Check them out at vineyardmax.net. Well, folks, we are about to enjoy a blast from the past with a longtime friend of mine, Mr. Bill Dance. And I'll give you a little bit of history. Bill was great friends with my uncle, who was named Luke Clayton. Now, my Uncle Luke owned Camp Carefree up in Arkansas, out of Memphis. Back in the 60s, I used to work there during the summer. Well, Bill Dance cut his fishing teeth right there. My uncle would furnish him some rental boats and Lake Horseshoe. Bill fished there a lot. He and my uncle were great friends. Back when I was writing a fishing column each week for the Dallas Morning News, I got a call from Bill Dance. He said, "This is Luke Clayton." He said, "There can't be two, but I bet there is." So that's how Bill and I connected years ago. and we have recorded lots and lots of recordings. The one coming up, I think you might enjoy. The sound quality may not be what we're digital today. I'm sure it's not, but it's a blast from the past with Mr. Bill Dance. So here we go.
Bill, like always, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
I love it, buddy. Love being with you. You know that.
We have a lot of fun, and you're much appreciated. I want you to understand that. Well, let's jump in on the questions here.
All
right. This old boy down in Hamilton, Texas. Why are slow-moving baits such as worms and lizards and topwaters sometimes? Why are slow-moving baits so effective on big bass?
Well, slow-moving baits, just like you said, like plastic worms, lizards, grubs, jig and plastic combinations, and even topwater baits, and, even stop-and-go crankbaits, just kind of waddle them and slow-moving crankbaits. I think the key word here is selective feeding. There's many times when all game fish, including the bass, will be highly, highly selective, in their feeding efforts. A fish must automatically compare the energy expended to catch its prey with the food value received. Now, this might sound highly sophisticated, but Mother Nature has provided for this so the fish may grow instead of losing weight while, chasing down a meal. If a bass has got to just, run feed down, just chasing down a minnow that's 2 inches long, that's faster than him, he's going to lose weight. So they have to measure that to compare that energy expended to catch its prey, or it's not worth the value. So Mother Nature has provided for this so the fish may grow instead of losing weight while chasing down. For this reason, lunkers seldom chase a lure very far, and that's why a slow-moving bait with the correct presentation is more appealing and easier to catch. A big bass is not tailored to long pursuit, and that's why these slow-moving presentation baits like the worm catch so many big fish. It's always been that way, and I know the big bass that I've been fortunate to catch in my lifetime. When I look back, I have caught on slow presentation type baits. Not to say that a big bass won't make a short burst of speed for a big fast-moving bait, but very seldom will they do it. Majority of big fish that I've caught in my lifetime, free-falling a spinnerbait, stop and go with a crankbait, a jig and plastic combination, a plastic worm, a lizard, something moves at a slow pace has always been much more appealing and much more attractive to a big fish.
I guess, Bill, a bass is an ambush feeder. He's got to hide and lay wait and jump out and be fast and grab it. Where I guess a species such as, for instance, a striped bass, a striper, or a white bass, open water, I call them open water schooling species, they'll often hit a fast-moving bait because I guess they make their living out in the open water chasing big schools of shad or whatever the bait fish is, right?
Yeah, they're much faster fish than a big largemouth. Mm-hmm. They're more tailored to fast pursuit, and they'll chase baits. But big fish, big bass, they're just not tailored to that get and go type retrieves.
Right. Well, there's nothing like trying to trick a big old bass. And there's nothing to me quite as exciting, and I wished I probably could fish till I was 99 years old, and I'd never perfect it, but topwater fishing, and I had this brings to mind a question from a guy up in Bonham, Texas, that sent in one. I keep notes on these, Bill, these questions, and then, when I get you, when we're here at the boat ramp, I've got them handy, but his question was, for me to ask you, is what is meant by establishing a rhythm when you're topwater fishing?
In other words, explaining what that terminology means, establishing a rhythm.
Right.
Well, it's the rhythm in a topwater bait that attracts bass. How you retrieve the bait determines the rhythm, and it can make a tremendous difference in your success or failure. Rhythm is determined by the length of the jerk or pull and the length of the pause. It's amplified by how loud or how quiet the bait is on the water. And once you find the rhythm that works for a given time, that's what you need to follow. Now, this is important to remember. Rhythm can change frequently during the day and from one location to another. Now, this is caused by water temperature changes, weather factors, and even the amount of wind on the water. There's simply no doubt about it. It's the rhythm in a topwater bait that attracts bass. It's very, very important, very, very important. And even old-timey topwater fishermen rely on this. I learned this a long time ago by some of the best topwater fishermen around that taught me it's the key to catching fish is in the rhythm. Fishing topwater baits. That's how made all the difference in the world in catching or not catching fish.
It is. It's so much. You know, when I was growing up in northeast Texas, my mother had an old. I never will forget. My mother and dad were rabid bass fishermen. Now you knew my Uncle Luke, and you know he picture him, and my dad was a smaller version of Luke, your old buddy, and my Uncle Luke. But they did a lot of their fishing with called them shiners under a cork, you know, and there weren't any big lakes up there, but they would, every farm pond in the world, they had access to fish. Well, my mother had a baby Lucky 13. You remember those. And, they're still out, I guess, and she had an old steel rod, and I bet I've crawled out broke off 1 million willow limbs retrieving that thing for her. But she mastered a technique that nobody ever taught her, but the pausing that bait, you know, that's a big deal, isn't it, Bill, on the topwater? Is learning to not just keep it chugging all the time, to pause it, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a rhythm. That's a rhythm. The rhythm.
The rhythm. That's what you're talking about. Yeah.
We were at Stick Marsh a couple of weeks ago down there, Palm Bay, Florida, and Stick Marsh. It's the headwaters of the St. John's, big marshy area down there, 60,000 acres, and we're using Rebel Pop R's, and it was unbelievable. I was fishing with Mike Tifton, a buddy of mine that lives right there in Palm Bay, and we was fishing this monstrous 60,000 acre marsh, and the way we had to fish that Pop R, if you popped it very much, the rhythm and the way we fished it was you just barely moved it. 3 quick, just little pop, pop, pop. And if you chugged it very much, it wouldn't hit it. It was amazing how slow they wanted it. You just popped it 3 times and let it sit.
Would you twitch it, Bill, or just kind of a blomp, blomp, blomp?
No, you'd barely twitch it. I mean, if you moved it over 6 inches, they wouldn't hit it. You just barely. I don't think we moved it 4 inches, just little bitty twitches, and it made all the difference in the world in the way they hit it. And he said, "I've never seen those fish do like they did today on that bait." And we caught 80 bass that day, and I would be willing to bet you that 75% of them hit that bait that way, just barely moving it. And you think that bait, you'd want to go kabloom, kabloom, kabloom with it.
Yep.
And that's where you'd normally fish a pop war. But you just barely popped it, just boop, 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 and just let it sit. And it just boop, boop, boop. And if you moved that bait over 4 inches, they would not hit it.
Isn't that wow?
It was just, it was amazing how they
yeah. Well, Bill, it's about time for you to. I'll get you to give me a little OJT on the top water fishing here. I never have mastered that, and we can go fishing. Then next week, you and I'll be right back here leaning on this boat at the boat ramp, won't we?
I'm ready. I'll be right here, buddy, if the good Lord's willing.
That's what I'm saying too, Bill. We'll see you next week.
Folks, that about wraps our show up for this week. I've enjoyed being with you, and I hope you've had a good time too. This segment was made possible by AGM Global Vision, maker of the Rattler and the Adder, two awesome thermal scopes that I use for all my night hunting. Check out AGM, all the products that they have there online, agmglobalvision.com. And, folks, we're also brought to you by the Choctaw Hunting Lodge up in southeast Oklahoma, located about, 45 minutes west of Hugo, Oklahoma, owned by the Choctaw Nation. It's about 45,000 acres of awesome mountain, country, hills, valleys, loaded with game. Lots of eastern turkey, and they do eastern turkey hunts if you're looking for a spot to hunt turkey in the spring. Also, I want to remind you about the Seneca 50 caliber Dragon Claw that shoots bullets and pellets. And by pellets, I'm talking about 200 and 210 grain lead, chunks of lead. It's a big bore air gun that I use. Check out the Seneca Dragon Claw there at PyramydAir.com.